Okay. What I don't get is why people like government so much. They just love it. They love government. They cheer for Trump. You know, it's make America great again with Trump. It's feel to burn with Bernie Sanders. And it's forward with Hillary Clinton. Well, it was back when the election was going on. It was, you know, each candidate had their respective slogan. And now that our president's Trump, it's make America great again. And people just cheer for these politicians like they're the best fucking thing since sliced bread. And I know that's a bit of a cliche of an expression, but I do find it appropriate to use because people really do act like these politicians are the shit. I mean, they cheer, they wave their signs around, you know, they're all in the crowd praising their new ruler. And I'm like, why? They're rulers, okay? They rule over your life. They control your life. You're not free. You're not free. They're taking away your freedom. And they're cheering for you. I mean, you're cheering for them. Yeah, let me do that thing. You're not free. You're taking away their... You're not free. You're taking away your freedom. And you're cheering for them. You're cheering for having your freedom taken away. I mean, when you cheer on a politician, you're basically saying, take away my freedom. I love it. Go. I mean, and I'm like, dude, isn't that a bad thing? Isn't that a bad thing to have your freedom taken away? Isn't that a bad thing to have someone rule over you rather than you rule over yourselves? Because that's all you really have the right to rule over. You know, it's yourself, okay? It's yourself, you get to rule. If it's not yourself, you don't get to rule. You don't get to rule over other people. You get to rule over yourself. You know, you get to rule over yourself because it's yourself, okay? It's kind of hard to go deeper than that. You know, you occupy this body, so I would think you get to rule over it and rule only over it. Those other bodies, those other people, you know, out there, they're separate for you, so you don't get to rule over them, okay? But that's what politicians do, is they rule over people. That's the function of government, is to rule. And whether it be with an iron fist or with some leniency, it's still rule, okay? It's still unjust. That's why I'm an anarchist, was once a libertarian, and before that was once a liberal. That's why I'm an anarchist, because I don't think anyone should rule over anyone. Even if the laws are supposedly just, even if the laws are just, it's still ruling. I mean, because government's a monopoly at force/violence, since only it can make the laws, and only it can enforce the laws. And people don't consent to government, okay? It's not something you consent to just by being born in the territory that it rules over. You can't call being born consent. It's like, you consent to the rules of the U.S. because you were born in it. It's like, yeah, I was born in it, but I didn't choose to be born here. In fact, I didn't even choose to be born. So you can't consider, you know, mere existence consent, because it's not. Consent has to be conscious, it has to be voluntary, it has to be aware, you know, it's got to be a choice that's carried out. Government's something you don't consent to. I mean, it's not enough to just be in a room with the contract to sign it, to consent to it. You actually have to pick up that pen and scribble your signature across the line to consent to that contract. That's why the social contract isn't legitimate. It's because, well, you're not consenting to anything just by being there, you know? You're not consenting to the contract just by being in the office and standing there. You consent to the contract by being in the office, picking up that pen, and scribbling along the X line. I mean, the line with the X on the left. I mean, that's consent. Just being there is not. So, going on a tangent a little, that's why the social contract is illegitimate. And getting back to the subject, birth is not consent. So you exist. And you didn't ask to exist. I mean, two people fuck, babies created. You didn't ask for any of that. You couldn't. You weren't born. So there might be a paradox involved where I concern the choice of being born, yet to even make a choice, you'd have to be born without the choice. So, okay, that's a possible paradox. But anyways, you know, two people fuck, babies form, they didn't choose to be born, and if you didn't choose to be born, then you can't engage in any contracts as a result, because you weren't born yet to have consent, to have consciousness, and voluntary autonomy to sign that contract. So, while, you know, you can have some just laws and lenient rule from government, you can have minimal government, or at least somewhat decent government, even if you have just laws, since you didn't consent to that, birth isn't consent, as I keep repeating, I can't stress enough, then that means government's a monopoly, an unconsensual monopoly on force and violence, force-based violence. So, other than following the NAP, regardless of law, are you really obligated to follow laws if you didn't consent to them? I mean, because if government's lacking consent, then the laws are lacking consent. Even if these laws do hinge on the NAP, like don't murder, don't rape, don't steal, don't kidnap. Even these laws, these just laws, or at least somewhat just laws, hinge on following the NAP. Are they really something to really legitimately follow and be held to accountable, other than the NAP, if you didn't consent to this government in the first place? And I say no. I say murder is still wrong, you still shouldn't do it, you still should be punished if you do so. But I think that it shouldn't really be government doing the punishing. I mean, for the moment, since we have government, I do think government is good if it punishes actual people for doing victim crimes. But overall, I don't think it should exist. I think, you know, your private commune should do the punishing, or maybe even the people themselves should do the punishing of the murderer, rapist, kidnapper, robber, whatever. I hope that doesn't contradict my position as an anarchist. I apologize if it does. So, getting back to the main point, I don't get how people can cheer on having their freedom, well, not only their freedom taken away, but the freedom of other people. I don't get how people can cheer that on. Because this isn't how you care for your fellow man. People are always talking about, you gotta care for your fellow man, yet by electing rulers that rule over them, they aren't caring for their fellow man. They're doing the opposite. They're harming their fellow man. And they're being rather selfish about it too. To elect rulers that have bizarre, cringy laws, such as forced education, you know, truancy laws, and war on drugs, and blue laws, and eminent domain, and gun control, and this, that, and the other. You know, people act like they're caring for their fellow man by voting for these people in, but they're doing the exact selfish opposite, which is harming their fellow man. And for their own selfish reasons, like, I don't think people should be able to do drugs, or skip school, or keep their property if people really want it, and this, that, and the other. I mean, eminent domain is basically, well, if we want your property so bad for a certain reason, we get to snatch it right under your feet, right off of you, which is bullshit. I mean, if you wanted to place something right there, you should have thought of that before someone else claimed their property. That person claimed their property, that area of space. They were there first, they get to keep it, and you gotta shove off. But, you know how eminent domain is. It's forced, so, you know, you can tell the government to go fuck itself and shove off all you want. They're still gonna take your property unless, by some miracle, you find some way to fix that, to remedy that act of aggression. So why people cheer for politicians that do this stuff and cheer for this stuff as well, I just can't get into. I just can't get on board with cheering for people that take away my rights. I mean, people are they're just so pumped. They're just so pumped for politicians. PFP. That they don't realize that this isn't something worth being jacked up and pumped up for, you know? Politicians shouldn't be looked at with praise. They should be looked at with, like, suspicion because they rule over you. we should be working towards an anarcho-capitalist society, not towards a society with more rule, with more government, with more rulers. That society sucks. We should be looking towards a society that lets you do whatever the hell you want, so long as it just applies to you. Slash only harms you, if you want to add a slash, though I feel like saying only applies to you or is your own personal life kind of covers that already. Doing drugs, that's just a personal thing. It only applies to you, only hurts you, if it even hurts you. So people should shove off at that. Being truant, well, you're not stopping anyone else from going to school, and you're not beating anyone else up. So I'd say, mind your own business, let this kid skip school. Eminent domain, well, it's your property, so do what you want with it. They can't take it away, no matter how badly they want it. But I want it. Well, but it's not yours, so it doesn't matter. And gun control, well, if you're not killing anyone just with your gun, then you get to keep it, alright? So, I guess people cheer on these politicians out of, ignorance. They don't realize how bad they really are. How bad the situation really is. If you cheer on someone to take away your rights rather than want to have your rights, hang on to your rights. And I don't get why people look at politicians. One thing, a real kicker, is people often look at politicians to fix things, like the economy, like to create jabs. People want jabs. He took our jab, that stuff or thing. People want jobs and expect the politicians to create the jobs. Even though it's a free market that creates jobs, okay? Free market creates jobs. Open a store, open a shop, open a factory, open a farm. Well, you're going to have people run that thing. You're going to have people work for you. So, in doing so, voila, you created jobs. That's what creates jobs is businesses. Businesses create jobs. Bureaucracy doesn't create jobs. Businesses do. Well, okay, technically they do create jobs in the public sector. You have the DEA, you have the police, you have the ATF, you have the firefighters. Yeah, technically they do create jobs, but that's the public sector. The private sector should be creating our jobs. And if the private sector doesn't create all the jobs, then it should create the majority of the jobs. Because that's what really gets things stopped, is when the private sector steps up to the plate and creates these jobs to create these good services. That's what works. Just having all this government bureaucracy all over the place, that doesn't work, okay? It's just tax dollars being wasted. We need the free market. We don't need the government. We need the free market. Free market, government, free market here, government here, bang. Government should be kicked out. So, these people, I guess they're barking up the wrong tree when they cheer for politicians. What I think they should be cheering for is the free market. Cheer for a businessman that morally earns his money and creates jobs for people rather than just a politician that's just looking to get into office. And I don't think Trump's any different. So, I get to rule my life, and by electing a politician, you're not exactly letting me do that. So it'd be really cool if people could just support the right people and not the wrong. And in some ways, politics isn't that exciting to me. I mean, it's exciting to talk about its schematics and how, this is right, this is wrong, about the world issues. But election day, elections are kind of boring. You got a bunch of people waving their signs around, woohoo, Trump Pence! And, you got the crowd of people, an audience at Trump's speeches and stuff, at Hillary's speeches, at Bernie's speeches. But it really isn't that exciting. I mean, I care, but not in the same way that these people do. I mean, you're electing your next ruler to take away your rights. How can that be that exciting? I mean, I don't know. It's just, that's the way people are, and I wish they were different, and I hope I can somehow convince them to be different. So, yeah, politics is dumb.